everybody. I welcome you all on the behalf of Provet Pharma Private Limited. And today we have two panelists. One is Dr. Maarten. You know him very well. He's a well-known personality now in India, and Dr. Africa Fernandez. Still, I will like to introduce Maarten. So Dr. Maarten De Gussem, he completed his DVM from Ghent University, Belgium in 2000. He worked in Alpharma for more and Jason Animal Health for a long time, and now he is managing director and in the Vetworks, and he started this institution in 2009, and he is also general manager for Vet Farm. So it's over to Maarten.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. I hope it has been good sessions for the last two sessions. On this moment, I will also be very happy to introduce my renowned, very famous colleague, Dr. Africa Fernandez. Africa is a Vetworks member. She's based in Spain. She has been working in Scotland with one of the major genetic companies. For many years, she has been working with AVHM as a management and health expert on breeders, and I'm very happy today that she can share with me this presentation on male fertility in poultry breeders. And let's say a subtitle maybe is, what do fertile testes need? Again, like in the previous sessions, there will be a 45 to 1 hour presentation. I will do a part of that. The more complicated parts, Dr. Africa will handle, all right? After this 1 hour, you will be invited to share your questions with us. You can, of course, you can shoot the questions during the presentation, but there's too many people for us to follow all the questions. The people from Provet will then will collect the questions, and we will together also answer your questions. All right, so let's go into the subject of today, male fertility in poultry breeders. You would think, hey, that is strange. That is maybe a topic that is not on top of my mind when I talk about improving my fertility issues or improving the fertilities. And I will have to have the screen now shared, Africa. Or maybe you can just go down with the screen if you want, Africa. Yes, thank you. So we'll have an introduction. We'll talk about the growth profile and uniformity and grading, feeding, transfer of males, testis development at critical stages, as well as fleshing. And at the end, we'll share some conclusions with you. Yeah, next slide. So what is the objective in breeder production? Well, I know that you know it, but remember, this is to produce the maximum quantity, okay, of day-old chicks. We want to have that the best quality. And obviously, we want to have it at the lowest possible cost. All right, next slide. Next slide up. Yeah, the challenge is going to be, this is the real challenge. I had recently, a few months ago, I had a very interesting discussion with Dr. Paul Siegel. He is based in the US, and he was one of the first geneticists that started splitting the chicken lines that we use for layer production versus the chicken lines that are used for meat production. That was just after the Second World War, in the late 40s, that process intensified a lot. And here you can see an image of this 57 broiler, let's say about 10 years after that selection process was going on. You can still see this is a good looking meat type of bird already, but you can really see that breast development is still very modest. Okay, if we go and look further 20 years later, then 30 years later, and you look to let's say the broiler of today, you can see the problem and the challenge from this image. You can see that this development, of course, the general weight has been increased. Maybe you have to give me Yeah, okay, thank you. You can see that the general, of course, weight has been increasing, but what is very much and easily noticeable is that breast muscle size. And that is really the challenge that we face when we talk from one side. That's, of course, fantastic, but because that is what we want to sell as our product, that is the meat. But if you look at the traits of fertility, is going to be that is going to be really the problem that we face, especially with our male breeders. Okay, next slide. So year on year, breeders have been selected. So there are some breeder characteristics being selected, but the strong emphasis is put on this broiler traits, this food conversion rate, this body weight gain, and that breast muscle development, as I just explained. So it really becomes more challenging to rear males. By the way, that's not only the fact and the matter in broiler production. We see similar things going on in turkey production. I know that in India, there's not so many turkeys being produced, but we see similar issues going on there. But yes, for us, yeah, male breeder rearing is a really big challenge. So if you look at and this is from Keith Bramwell, if you look at causes of losses in hatchability, and we look at the different causes, you will see that mortality of the embryos is a little bit more than 50% of the total amount. And that's a good split between late mortality, about 24%, mid mortality, as you know, that is an easier period for not losing embryos. Then the early mortality is usually the most sensitive period. But if you look at this picture, and I know that a lot of people would look into that late mortality, mild mortality, early mortality, when we do our breakouts, that's what we focus on. But you can see we have a dramatic 42% of infertility on average that cause losses in our hatchability. That's enormous, okay? And obviously the male fertility and the main cause of this infertility is actually linked with breast development. Other aspects are going to be the mating behavior of the males, but breast development is really the main cause of infertility. Next slide. So why do we focus on this male management? Well, to be honest, because it's low-hanging fruit. One female is producing about 150, 160 chicks. That I know that depends a little bit on your production levels that you have. And know in some countries, some regions, depending on the management and the housing and the climate, that's not going to be that easy. But let's say if a female produces about 150, 160 chicks, remember that one male can sire 2,000 chicks, okay? So that also means that if you have poor quality sires, poor quality males, you would have an enormous impact on your cost per chick, okay? So remember the whole structure of feeding, housing, collecting eggs. It is the same cost to produce one unfertile egg as for a fertile egg, but obviously you don't have any return with your unfertile egg. Okay, so that is really, that is why the male management is really the low-hanging fruit when we start to talk about improving breeder management. Okay, so there's two distinctive periods, the same for the females, obviously. We have a rearing phase and we have a production phase. The objective during the rear is to produce a population of males with the potential to have higher levels of fertility during the whole life of production. All right, so we want the animals to be developing so that they have the potential when they are placed with the females to have a whole life of good fertile production. So the objective during lay, we have birds. Hopefully we start with a good potential, but there we have the challenge, by the way, that is similar to what we see with our female breeders, but we want to keep and maintain this high levels of fertility during the whole life of production. Ideally, we end when we cull the males, we should end with a minimum 70-75% fertility rate at that stage. Okay. So why is breeding important for male fertility? I think you already can give me the answer because you have been listening to the introduction. Africa, next slide. The key to good fertility is to develop a feeding and management practices for the correct development of the reproductive system, so the testes, and to avoid that negative impact that you could have from that. Yeah, if you don't limit that enormous development of that breast muscle, so you have to control the growth rate of that breast muscle. Next slide. So with that short introduction, I would like to hand over the word to Dr. Africa, and you have the floor, Africa.
Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody, depending where you are. So I'll carry on with the presentation from here. So I'll start. As Maarten mentioned, growth profile is very critical. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about growth profile and then uniformity and grading. So the first 4 weeks of the life of the male are very important because there is a massive development of all the digestive system, respiratory system, skeleton, especially muscles, internal organs. So all the structures that they will need for the future will have a massive development during this point. And so at 4 weeks, 50% of the skeleton is already developed, has already grown. If we go into another 4 weeks, by 8 weeks, 80% of the skeleton has developed. Another very important thing that happens, and I will explain a little bit more later on, is the Sertoli cells. The Sertoli cells will stop multiplying and developing by roughly 8 weeks. So then the birds continue to grow very, very rapidly for the next 12 weeks, 13 weeks, and by then 95% of the skeleton is already formed. So you can see how critical this early development of the bird it is. So the next thing that happens is that there is a steady growth just before a sexual development. And once the birds are light stimulated, there is the massive growth that takes place is related with the reproductive tract. So very important two stages, two critical stages in the life of the bird. So after light stimulation, testes grow very quickly, very rapidly. And I'll explain a little bit more about how the testes grow and how important for fertility, especially late fertility, because that is the main problem. The main problem with fertility in frogs is the loss of fertility later on. At the beginning, most of the males are fertile and we have a lot of males. The main problem is to keep this population of males that we need until the life of the flock ends. And another thing that is very, very important is that the males keep growing. They should never lose weight, and during the laying period, they should always very gradually, very slowly, but they should always increase body weight. So the final objective of all our management interventions is that we create a population of males with the same requirements. To be able to do that, to be able to manage a flock, we have to create individuals that have very, very similar requirements. So when we give an input, feed, water, light, they all respond in a very similar way. So a little bit of a slightly different representation of the body weight profile, highlighting these two areas here where there is a very critical and where there is a massive growth of the body weight of the bird. And these two areas are the first one is when there is a development of the body. There is what I was mentioning about the vital organs, skeleton. And then the second stage is when they are developing, preparing for reproduction. And as you can see here, I have highlighted very important that they keep growing after pig production, after they reach maturity. And there is in this other picture, a very graphic representation of these two critical periods here, where a skeleton, especially skeleton and muscle develop. And then the second period is when they start their development for keeping the species for reproduction. Okay. So what happens very early on that is very related with male fertility? What could happen with the males that could hinder their potential to be fertile until the end of their life? And that is the development and multiplication of the Sertoli cells. The Sertoli cells are very important in the supporting of the sperm maturity. So if these Sertoli cells have not developed to their full potential and have not multiplied as much as they can, and this is the Sertoli cells, to give you an idea, they are about 1 million a day old, and by the time the chickens are 8 weeks, they will reach 100 million. So you can see that how the requirement to grow and multiply is very important. The management during this period of the males needs to support this growth and multiplication. So what could happen during early rear that could affect the development of the Sertoli cells? Poor growth. So it's very important that the birds grow to their full potential required early on, very early on, especially brooding, and I'll talk a little bit about brooding later on. If we have excessive feed restriction, the first thing that will be damaged will be the Sertoli cells. Poor access to feed and water, and stress is also a cause for affecting the Sertoli cells. So a little bit about brooding that is different in the males and in the females. The males during in the hatchery, after hatching, have a few more procedures than the females. After sexing, they may get, or most likely they will get, big treatment, a toe treatment, and that will make them a little bit less able to start, as well as the females eating and drinking and adapting to the new environment when they arrive to the farm. So it's very important to observe their behavior, and if we see that they may need a slightly higher temperature than the females, to support that, to increase the temperature so they are comfortable in the farm. Another very important aspect is small colonies, small pens of males, because that will make the population much easier to manage and therefore the uniformity that we can reach when the population is small is much higher. We could improve the coefficient of variation by even 2% with this small the population at the beginning. And it's a little bit more work, but it's worth putting this amount of time and effort at the beginning of the life of the flock. Another area that it will help the birds to find easily feed and water, to start this process of learning where the feed is, where the water is, and how to reach it, is if we have 100% of the brooding area covered with paper. Stocking density, increased stocking density will facilitate also this process of learning and reaching to all the resources, feed and water, good environment. So if possible, 50 to 60% of males per square meter on arrival is very important. And then it's very important also to decrease very gradually the stocking density about every 3-4 days, and making sure always that we are observing the population and that they are able to reach feed and water. Optimal ventilation, very, very critical, because as we mentioned before, they are growing very fast. They are setting the base for the future. All their organs need oxygen to grow. So we need to have optimal ventilation. Quite often people will, to try to keep the temperature, they will not ventilate the house for the first few hours, few days even, and that is, it could potentially cause a lot of problems later on, because they don't get the oxygen that they need. Okay, so a good way to check if the chicks have been under stress while their feathers have grown is to look at the pin feathers. In the middle picture, we can see there is no marks in the feathers. There are no stress marks. So this chick had no problems during the brooding period. In the top picture, we can see some areas where when the feathers grow is lighter, the feather growth is lighter. So that is an indication that the birds, while that was happening, while the feathers were growing, they were under some kind of stress, environmental stress, not being able to find feed and water, too high stocking density, any kind of stress will cause that. At the bottom, you can see that the stress marks are very, very numerous, a lot of stress marks. So this chick had a lot of stress during the brooding period, early in life. So another thing that is important is not only the skeleton that grows, but as mentioned, the viscera, the internal organs, have to grow also at the same pace to keep in the future, as the birds grow, to keep supplying and absorbing feed, water, oxygen. So it's very important that there is a internal organ development, but also that this internal organ development is uniform. Uniformity is very critical. It's a key area that we need to focus on, because we need to be able to treat these different units, different individuals within a flock as a unit. And the only way we can do that is if they are all of similar sizes, all similar requirements, so we can supply each individual with their needs. We can supply, give what they need at each stage of their life. So just to highlight again the importance of the skeletal size, you can see here males that are about 10 days old, their shank length is already very uneven. You can see there is a big variation in these males. So that is not a good start. And I'll show a very clear graph in a minute, and you can see here, there it is. You can see in the vertical, I'll just move this one. Okay. So in the vertical axis is the millimeters, the length in millimeters of the shank length, and here at the bottom in the horizontal axis is their weight. So at the beginning you can see the slope of the line is very vertical. It goes very fast. They grow very fast at the beginning as they put weight on. So every 100 grams that they grow, in weight, they increase their size, their shank length, by over 3 millimeters. But later on, after 13 weeks, this doesn't happen. They could put weight on, obviously, they could grow in weight, but the shank length doesn't increase that much. So you can see 100 grams, they will increase in the shank length by just under 1 millimeter. Big differences. So if we want to improve their size, here is where we need to focus on. Later on, if we give them more food, they will increase in body weight, but no size. And this will create problems when we want to feed them. And I'll show a few pictures also later on. So we could have two males, the same body weight, but very different height. Very different posture also, and very different size, very close in size to the females, which will make the mating process a lot more difficult for them, especially as they grow older, as they put weight on, and the center of gravity will change much faster than in a taller male. In terms of feeding, if we have different size, different height of males, it will be very difficult for us to adjust the feeders so all of them could reach, but not the females. So it's very important from a feeding point of view that they are all the same size, and there are differences between the size of the female and the size of the male. And this is about, it varies a little bit, it changes, but with lines and so on, but it's about 15–20% differences between males and females. Okay, so the title of the presentation was how to get testes fertile, because we wanted to focus on what we are trying to do with the chicks. When we place chicks, the aim is to create a bird that is able to be fertile until we deplete the farm. And how do we achieve that in the breeding period? We need to follow the right body weight profile. We need to achieve a good frame size, especially at the beginning, first 4 weeks. Fleshing, very critical, because fleshing indicates how developed is the breast muscle. And as we mentioned, Maarten mentioned at the beginning, breast size is determined in fertility. If the breast is too big, is first of all the problem of stability of size of the breast. Stops the complete mating, so there will be mating, but it will not be successful. So it's very important. And then also, as the birds stop being fertile, stop being working, the breast muscle develops even more, so it creates like a vicious circle. Carcass conformation, also very important, and this refers to the tone of the muscle that will indicate how tone, how fit is the male. So Control and assessment of the population, really very important, and we should weight males if we can 10%, and I know that 10% is a very high percentage. If we want to reduce it, 2%, or even some people will weight 50 males per population. But the more we weight, the more we handle the males, the better idea we will have of how the population is going. And obviously, uniformity of all these parameters in our population is very critical. Okay, so in this graph, you can see that we are trying through what I'll explain a little bit more later on, through grading, through the reading period, we are trying to improve each time the uniformity of the population. We want to achieve, and this may be challenging, 90% uniformity in the population. So 95% of the males are plus or minus 10% of the target body weight. That is the ideal before they start sexual maturity and reproduction. So how do we achieve this? Grading is a very good tool, and grading is normally done as a standard in females, not so often in males, but it pays off later on because we will create a uniform population of males. We will remove the ones that are more effectively, that are behind, that have leg problems, big deformities, any kind of defect. They should be removed during this process. And also we are classifying them by weight, and by doing that, we are giving all the individuals within the population a better chance to compete with each other. So a small bird does not have to compete with a bigger one, much bigger one, and it will be able to catch up, hopefully much quicker. So we could do a visual grading initially at 7-10 days, and classify them in 2 to 3 populations. Some people even have 4 populations, and as I said, it creates more work, but it's always a balance. If we balance the benefit and the work and what we improve in fertility, in the number of chicks, and we have to decide what we can do in terms of grading. And each time we will remove between 6 and 8% of the males. We could do the first visual grading, the second one 3-4 weeks, 8 weeks, and 15 weeks. And in the last 3 will remove between 3 and 4% of the males, especially the ones with defects, behind, well behind, or even behind. We want uniformity. So the more uniform we can have them, the better. And we want all the males that we have be of the best quality. It's right from the beginning. We don't want to select later on, before we are going to mate up the males with the females, the best ones. We want to have all of them when we do the selection for the mating up time, be the best. That is the ideal situation. So at transfer, obviously, we'll remove the poor quality males also. So we have the best. And then in a lot of companies, they do 2-3 times during the laying period a grade of the males based on body weight, and this improves uniformity and also improves fertility in the males, how they compete with each other and holds the fertility much better. Okay, so a little bit now about feeding and transfer of males. So feeding, very, very important. Feeding both in rear and in lay. And in rear, depending on the country, the company, there are different ways people will feed the males. Here you can see in the first picture, spoon feeding, and spoon feeding is very good, has, like any system, has pros and cons, but the point that I would like to highlight here is, in this case, in this picture, the birds are being hit by the pellets, and you can see they are all escaping, they are all far away from the spoon feeding, and the ones that are nearest to the circle, the empty circle, they have started eating. The ones in the middle have not started eating, and that is not a good thing. We are already creating a reason for these chickens to be uneven, or to start being uneven. And as I showed in the graph, very important, because the more as they get weight, they will grow. If they can't get the feed, they will not grow, and they will not be able to catch up later on, or very little. In the next picture, we can see this is already lay, and you can see these males in the corner here, all piling up, trying to eat, no males here. So that is, again, no ideal situation, and we should find out why this is happening and resolve it as soon as possible, because the males that are not able to eat the right amount of food, the allocation of food for that day, very quickly they will lose condition, and they will, the first thing that they will do, their testes will start to regress at a higher rate that it should, so they will become infertile much quicker. So very important, observe feeding as often as possible, because feeding is the most important thing that happens in a farm during a 24-hour period. If we go to a farm and we don't see feeding, we have lost a big chunk of information for that farm to be able to manage that farm and fix potential problems that we can encounter. If the more time we take to solve this problem in the rearing period, or this problem in the laying period, the risk is higher of having fertility problems later on. Another important aspect is to keep adjusting feed, and I'll go a little bit more in detail about that. And this is simple, if you like, but it's very critical. If the birds don't eat with equal opportunity, they will not grow, develop, and have good fertility later on. So the way to check if they have actually eaten, and they have eaten the amount that they should roughly have eaten, is to do crop assessment and see what percentage of the males that we are checking, we are handling, 50%, if we can, have eaten, or have very little feed, or have not enough feed. And try to see why is this happening and resolve it as soon as possible. So another couple of pictures here, you can see they are, looks like well distributed. There is a couple of females here, so we should avoid this. Because it's very difficult to allocate, to know exactly how much feed the males are eating if they have females eating from their feed, or the other way around. Here is a different problem, too many males in the feeders, in the feeder pans, so they are not all going to get their share, and again, it will create problems with fertility later on. So just to summarize about feeding, all birds should have access to feed at the same time, very important. All space is taken, no empty feed spots. And to be able to do that, we need to keep adjusting. If we remove birds from the flock because we are doing a selection, because we want to reduce mating ratio, we should adjust also the feed space. Very important that the feed distribution is uniform and is fast. Ideally, we want less than 3 minutes. No females should be in the male feeder and no males in the female feeder. So a few more pictures of what we should not see during feeding. You can see here, very important to maintain equipment. Sometimes this is done on purpose, so if the males have not adjusted well to the farm, they have a place to go and eat in the female feeder, but is no ideal. Here you can see another male eating from the female feeder because this is open, and at the top there is no even distribution of feed in the truck. So that is another challenge. And here we can see females eating from the male feeder, and this could be because the males are not uniform, not the same size. So if we have the feeder higher, a percentage of the males will not be able to eat, and but you can see what problem will create here. An idea that is done in some locations is what they call male restaurants. So what they do, they train the males during the breeding period. They start at roughly 12 weeks, and they blow a whistle. So the male, every time they feed the males, and the males associate this sound to being fed. So when they move the males to the laying period, to the laying farm, the production farm, they do the same. So the males know they are going to be fed, and they start going to their feeders. The females are not aware, so it's much easier for them to start gathering around the feeders. So in some places they put a net, so there is no possibility of females going into there, and the males are on their own in this little area. In some other countries, they don't put the net, and it's the same idea. They still manage to keep the males separated from the females. So this is very effective in separate sex feeding. So drinking, I'll move the picture here. Very important, it's very critical that we don't see this situation here, because it will create stress, and stress is not so good for Sertoli cells, as we mentioned. Transfer. Transfer is another critical period, especially if the males have a different system of feeding and drinking in the breeding period and in the production period. So very important that you can see here, we are training the males so they know where feed is and where water is. What normally will happen is that the males will be fed 50% the day before transfer, another 50% more feed of their allocation for that day after transfer. The feeders are lower, so they can see the feed and they can quickly identify where they have to go and eat. Similar with the water, we should try to make the training of this changing of system as easier as possible and show them even where the water is. I have seen mortality shortly after transfer because the males just couldn't find the water. They didn't know where it was because before they had the water on the floor and now is on the slats, and they can't find it. Some people will put a little slat on in the breeding farms to facilitate this process also. And critical that we do this crop assessment, always check that what we think is happening and the process of learning is actually going well. If we take 50 males random and see if they have been eating, if they have been drinking, if there is a paste, a soft paste consistency of the crop. So critical during the right after transfer is that the males have access to the female feeders, because the comb is still not very well developed, and they will have access for maybe 2, 3, even longer number of weeks. So it's very important that we minimize this as much as possible. In some farms, they will put pipes at the top of the feeder to minimize this access of the males to the female feeders. They will, in other farms, I have seen this, and this is very effective also, these little bands, and that will again reduce very considerably the access of the males to the female feeder, which will stop when they get their comb well developed at 26, 28 weeks. And during this period, they could get actually quite heavy. And once they get heavy, it's especially the breast muscle where this body weight is obviously accumulated, and this will hinder their fertility, as we were explaining with the development of this very big breast muscle that we have to maintain. They will have much higher maintenance requirements than a leaner male. So again, uniformity is critical here. So a little bit about testis development and the critical stages of this testis development. Again, the graph, we are now in this second period, critical second period, where is the reproductive organs are developing. So we have the testis, and the testis before 15, 16 weeks, not much happens at a macroscopic level. Microscopically, it does, but there is no much to see when we open the males during this time and check the testes. The size does not change that much. But at 15 weeks, they start growing a little bit, not a lot, and we could go from at 15 weeks, one tested 0.5 grams to 2 grams at 20 weeks. But what happens then? We have light stimulation, and light stimulation causes a massive development of the testes. So they could grow from these sort of 2 grams to 12 grams in 3 weeks, to even the top will be around 40, 45. It will depend on the line and also how these males were managed. But I have the seen males that have 50-gram both testes. And then the testis size plateaus for a few weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then it starts to regress very slowly. This is a natural process. We cannot stop this regression, but we could, with management, we can slow down this regression very considerably, and we could have a flock with very good fertility even at older age. When the testes go below 15 grams, we can see that the semen production is much reduced, and below 6 grams or so, there is no much semen produced at all. So another important, very important aspect of fertility is mating ratio. We need to make sure that these males, especially at the beginning, between up to 30, 32 weeks, are not too aggressive. The mating ratio is not within line. So if we follow the guide, but we still see females that are losing quite a lot of feathers, like the picture 3 and 4, side damage, that is an indication that the males are very aggressive and or the mating ratio is high. So we have to deal with that as soon as possible, because once they lose their feathers, they will not regrow, and these females will tend to escape and hide from the males, and therefore the eggs that they will produce will be infertile. So very, very important that this is looked at very carefully right at the beginning, because once they get to this stage, there is no lot we can do. Okay, so a few pictures of when we select males and look at if they are working or not. So on the left-hand side, we have a male with very pale, good comb, but no fertile. It's too pale. You can see if we look at the vent, very pale, a lot of feathers around the vent. The abdomen, no feather wear, so that means there is no lot of mating activity in this male. And also the testes are regressed, are small. There is no lot of vascularization, so that means they are not very functional or not functional at all. And they become, instead of sort of cream, pale color, they gradually, as they become no functional, they become gray to very, very gray. In the middle picture, we have the vent. We can see the vent is quite red. There is some feathers disappeared. So this male it looks like there is some feathers lost in the abdomen. So this male looks like he's working, but unfortunately, he may not be working in a few weeks' time. On the right, we have a good color male, very red in the face. The cloaca is again not a lot of feathers at all around the cloaca. All are gone, very red, very moist. So that is an indication why it's a very good male working, no a lot of feathers in the abdomen. So again, means mating activity, and you can see the testes very well developed, very vascularized. So that means they are very functional. So it's very important that when we reduce the mating ratio, we also, if we can, open the male and check that we were right. We can see that the male that we have selected has not got a very functional testes. Leg health and litter quality is very important for fertility, not only because uneven floors will make us very difficult to manage the males, very difficult to adjust the feeder height. So we could have even, again, back to females eating from there. But also it will affect fertility, because if they have leg problems, they will not be able to mate, and so it will be not so good. So very important that leg health is good, and obviously litter quality is paramount. So it's good to do, as I mentioned, if we are going to remove males from the flock, to go and check, do an assessment of what we think with other people from other farms, and see if we agree based on external appearance of the male, cloaca, feathering, color. What's happening with the testis is quite a useful tool. It's a very good tool to show us how well we have managed and how well we are able to identify males that are not working. So a little bit about fleshing. Fleshing is critical in fertility, because of it changes the center of gravity of the males. Overfleshing will cause unsuccessful mating. So very important that the fleshing will change between different lines of males, but most of the time it is around this point here during the production period. And we want between 2.5, as you can see here, 2.5 to 3 during the whole production period is the ideal. But as the birds get older, they will get a little bit more flesh, but we want to slow down this process as much as we can, and have as many males as we can hovering around this point, and very, very gradually going to 3 or 3.5, but very slowly. So for me, it's very important, as I have been mentioning, to monitor what's actually happening, because if we monitor, we can reflect on what has happening with this flock, and we can improve what we do in terms of management, and we can compare farms. So very important to do fleshing scoring as we weight the males, for example, and also get people from different farms, from different houses, so everybody scores the males in the same way, so we can compare. So a few more pictures. So in the middle we have a very vascularized testis. You can see the vast differences producing semen. In the right-hand side, these testes are much smaller. There is some vascularization, but no as much. And the color is not as cream, if you like, as the ones in the middle. And they are still producing, but not as much. You can see it's less full, it's less fuller than in the middle picture. On the left, the testes are again much more smaller than the right-hand side testes, and they are not producing any semen. The color is much gray, very gray, and very little vascularization, very little. So we can see, I put a picture of a male with good posture, tall. The testes from the male in the right-hand side are a lot much heavier, big breast muscle, not started to not being so active. And on the other corner, this male has stopped, their testes are not functional anymore, is too underfleshed. And as mentioned, the first thing that stops is the reproductive function. So his testes are not functional anymore. And now you can see the breast muscle very thin in the bird on the left-hand side. Good fleshing, ideal fleshing on target, on the middle, and well over flesh on the right-hand side of the screen. Okay, so to summarize, to produce a uniform male population with good persistent fertility until the life of the flock, they start very early on during the life of the bird. We need to focus on meeting the requirements of every male at each stage of their development. We need to follow the right body weight profile. We need to control this growth and the development of the breast muscle, very important. And we need to allow a gradual increase of body weight, especially during the laying period, because a lot of people traditionally will say, okay, I only give them 120, 130 grams, and that's where I'll keep them for until the end of their life. No, the feed level should increase very little, maybe 1-2 grams. We need to check body weight, we need to check especially fleshing, conformation, and decide if we can go a little bit higher or a little bit slower. And monitoring, as mentioned, very important, and very important that we keep records so we can improve and see what we do in the next flock to improve what we have done in the current one. Okay, so that's the summary.
Right.
And that's the end.
Okay, great. Thank you, Africa. Maybe just for before we start the Q&A session, I would like to share this information, Dr. Ajay, that we have a webinar coming up in, I think, about 2 weeks' time. You can have a look at our website. This is, in fact, this is a webinar, but we have a similar presentation on male fertility. The seminar itself is available online. I know with the time zone differences, it's not so easy for you guys to attend in India, but I just wanted to share that. Okay, so we have a seminar coming up for people that want to go deeper. Of course, then we will not cover only the male fertility, but we will discuss everything what is management and health of breeder production. Okay, so both the female and the male side. All right, but that's just with that, I would like to give the word back to Dr. Ajay. That will, as usually, lead the Q&A part. Dr. Ajay, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you, Africa. It was very nice presentation. You have covered provided all the insights about male fertility. Thank you for that. It was very, very wonderful in the presentation. So I will just start question and answer session. The first question is, which seminal protein associated with male fertility?
Well, I will say is especially lysine, digestible lysine, because it has a direct impact on breast development. So I will say proteins in general very important, amino acid levels very important, and you know, in a lot of companies now they have started to have a special male diet with lower amino acids, especially lysine, lower crude protein, lower energy, and the main reason, lower calcium, is to control breast muscle development.
Right. Thank you. The second question is, which semen test do you recommend to be done to ascertain the fertility?
To assess fertility?
Yeah.
Well, I will say looking at the male secondary characteristics and looking at the feathering, amount of feathers in the abdomen, cloaca, moist, red, and ultimately you can kill the males and see if they are producing semen and testis size. Some people, but I think this is a little bit more difficult to do at farm level. They will milk the males and check the testis, or sorry, the semen under the microscope and see was the number of spermatozoos, what is percentage of abnormalities. Another way I just is to look at in the females the holes in the vitelline membrane, and that is heavily correlated with fertility.
Okay.
But again, you know, is yeah, not everybody is able to do this at farm level.
But Dr. Africa, if I hear you well, what you say that you prefer to look at the external parameters to be assessed rather than going to a microscopic assessment, which is a little bit complicated, and you don't feel there's a lot of added value to that. Is that what you say?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. Thank you. Because I think the attendees want to know about what tests to be done in the labs on the semen.
Yes, you could do an assessment of the semen under the microscope. You can take semen samples from the males and assess, you know, percentage of abnormal sperm, sperm count. You can do these holes in the vitelline membrane, which is probably more accurate, because also a big component of male fertility is behavior. So you miss, if you just do a sperm count, you miss the behavior part. But if you check the female, if you check, even if you do breakouts, you know, a lot of people will incubate eggs, a number of eggs for 3-4 days, and assess how many are fertile. And again, that will give you a very good indication of how fertile are your males.
Fine. Right. Thank you. This is the very interesting question. How about cryopreservation of the semen? Is it possible in poultry to preserve the semen in the cryogenic container?
Yes. I mean, traditionally, again, is the chicken semen has been quite difficult to keep frozen in good condition, but there are some recent work that they were able to cryopreserve semen in good conditions. Yeah, and I could give some articles if people are interested in more detail of how it's done. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. And what nutritionally important ingredient you feel to improve or maintain the male fertility?
What is from a nutritional point of view? What is important?
What is important? Like either vitamin, mineral, or whatever the
amino acids. Amino acids is very important because it has a direct impact on breast development. So very important. Nutrition in male fertility is very important, but I will say amino acids, protein is the most important thing because it will help you to control breast development.
Right. As an additive, the question, Dr. Ajay, was as a additive, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of additives would you recommend, Dr. Africa, to support the male fertility?
I mean, some people will use different products, selenium, different minerals, and you know, I'm not a nutritionist, and I haven't seen a significant effect of these additives, but you know, it's possible that they have, especially I think the additives will especially be useful if the male fertility is already quite good. In flocks where the fertility is very poor, I think the first thing to do is looking at management. If the fertility is already good, I think feed additives could help a little bit more. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you. Right. So, is it necessary to follow separate sex feeding? And what will happen if the males eat female feed? What will be the adverse impact on the fertility?
This is in rear or in production? In production.
In rearing as well as in production.
Okay. Well, in rearing, is not so good to have males and females together, because the body weight profile is very different, and you will not be able to control as well how both sexes grow. So it's very critical to grow the males and the females separate. Very important. Okay. In production, if the males eat from the male feed will be normally start with early production. So before that, they will have males and females the same feed. But in production, the male ration, if they eat from the female feeder, it will be more difficult to control their breast development and body weight, because the female feeder has higher protein level than the males. It will have 1 to 2% more protein than the male feed.
Right. Thank you. Is there any relation between mating behavior and fertility?
Yes, mating behavior, very important. If the males are very aggressive, is not so good, because they will damage the females. They will fight with other males. They will stop good reproductive behavior. So it is normally aggression. People associate aggression meaning good fertility, but it should be a balanced aggression. The males should be able to stand their ground against the females or against other males, but over aggressive males are not so good, or over pacific males not so good either, because they will not be able to compete with other males, and they will not be able to mate with the females that easily either.
Yeah. So how to control the aggression, so that, or how to balance the aggression so that there will be minimum damage to the females as well as will get good fertility?
Yes. Well, aggression could have a genetic component also, but probably the most important component is development. How in front are the males in relation to the females, and how the relation in body size is very important. So the main thing to control is synchronization in maturity between males and females, and differences in size between males, in body weight between males and females. If the males are too mature, heavy, they tend to be more aggressive, especially at the beginning, in the first 8 to 10 weeks, and that's when they tend to cause the most damage in terms of the feathering of the females, side damage. and that will cause a permanent damage to the fertility of the flock. It's very important to reduce mating ratio as quickly as we see this, or even, and the males to remove from the flock is the heavy ones. The heavy ones are we should remove, because are the ones that are causing the problems most likely. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Can we go for actually, I would like to clear, you may be having idea, in India, most of the flocks are reared in cages, not in the deep litter, right? Now, in deep litter, there are certain companies or certain breeders, they go for flocks, breeder flock in the deep litter. So, if we are not getting the desired fertility in the deep litter with the natural mating, can we go for artificial insemination in the deep litter?
Yes, I have seen, not many, but I have seen one or two cases where companies for different reasons have done this, and that will improve fertility. In fact, quite often artificial insemination have higher fertility than natural mated flocks, because you make sure that you inseminate all the females, and yes, but you have to train the males. It needs a lot of labor, a lot of handling, so it has problems also. So ideally, natural mating, having good male management is probably the way to go.
Right. Thank you. Right. Which is the easiest way of sexing of the chicks, day-old chicks, whether it is the vent sexing or feather sexing?
What is easier? Easier definitely feather sexing, but with depending on if the birds are slow feathering or fast feathering. With slow feathering, you could feather sex the broilers. With fast feathering, you can't. So it depends what is possible to do. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. Fine. Right. How to grade male during laying? Male grading during the laying, whether will it affect any fertility issue?
To grade the males, the grading of the males, it actually improves fertility, because you grade the males, if the population diverted a little bit, and that happens naturally, you bring the population back to lower CV, and improves fertility. You also handle the males, select the males, and bring males from other populations. You do basically intra-spiking, but with weighing the chickens also, so they are more even, and it does help fertility. Yes, it does help. Again, it has it requires handling, but if there are if there is the possibility of doing this, it does, is very good. Yeah.
Yeah. What and continue to this question. What you feel, whether inter spiking will be useful or inter spiking?
Okay. Well, both could help improving fertility by 2-3% maybe, but the problem with inter-spiking, so you bring males from other farms, is biosecurity, and because of this reason, biosecurity, you bring other diseases into the farm, or the risk of bringing other diseases into the farm is high. People are trying to focus on male management more and more, and reduce inter-spiking, or even stop it altogether, and do intra-spiking, which is moving males within the same farm or even within the same house. You know, in some flocks, and that this is again very good for uniformity and helps to manage the birds. They will have 2 or 3 pens in the laying house, and they will move the males between the pens, and that is good for fertility also, because it brings change in the hierarchy of the population and more activity.
Right. Thank you. There is one question which is actually for females. How to control prolapse in females?
Yep. Normally, prolapse happen because the females are not ready or were not ready for light stimulation. They were not mature enough, so they start laying, and the eggs tend to be to cause. If they are too big, there are a lot of double yolks. If they are sort of not ready for laying, so you overstimulate this chicken, it produces a very big egg, and that causes eversion of the cloaca. So to control prolapse, to control double yolks, the most important thing is to assess the flock, do pelvic bone assessment, speciation space in the pin bone, in the pelvic bone, and if they have normally I use 3 fingers. People that is bigger than me is normally 2 fingers, and 80 to 85% of the females have to have 3 fingers before they are light stimulated. That will reduce very considerably the problems with prolapse, with double yolks, with egg peritonitis early late, or even in some flocks even later they continue to have egg peritonitis.
Right. Thank you. Do you feel there is any direct relation between egg size and fertility?
Yes. As the eggs get bigger, the fertility decreases, and I have a very good graph, because the percentage of embryo deaths increases in very big eggs. So yes. So it's very important to control egg size. Egg size is very important, not only because the fertility, the mortality, embryo mortality is higher in bigger eggs, but also it's a lot more difficult to handle big eggs in the trays. The hatchability is lower, because it's more difficult in the hatchery to create an ideal environment when the egg size is big. Yeah.
Fine. Right. Thank you.
Ventilation. Yeah.
Right. Now another question is actually we get ear infection in males and females both, but why we get more ear infections, or we can say otitis, in the males than the females?
I think it's possible. I have seen this, yes, and it's correct that it tends to be more in males. I am not sure if it's to do with them being bigger, or is anatomical reason that they tend to be more prone to ear infections. Yep. I'm not 100% the reason why, but yes. I mean, I have seen more ear infections also in flocks that have a lot of antibiotic treatments. Yes.
Right. Thank you. What is the reason that we maintain 1 degree higher temperature in males than the females during brooding?
Yes, well, the main reason is because they are a little bit more, they have been sexed like the females, but also they have been big trim. Normally females are not big trim. They have had their 2 treated. They sort of so they are a little bit more under discomfort. So you know, again, it's like in humans, if you are not feeling as good, 1 degree or more, depending on behavior. You know, behavior will tell us if the males are requiring more temperature, but also sun lines, the males to start with maybe a little bit smaller, they tend to start a little bit more slowly. So I have, in my experience, if they get a little bit more temperature, they seem to be more comfortable, their behavior seems to be better, the noise that they make, they seem to be much comfortable, yes. Mm-hmm.
Fine. And like we get more ear infection, the same in that line, we get more lameness issue in males than the females. What could be the reason? And what is the remedy?
Right. Usually, leg problems in rear or in lay, or okay, leg problems in rear, I will say most of the time is to do with excessive feed restriction, not a very good body weight profile. They tend to have more leg problems, poor feed distribution. When the feed distribution is not uniform, the birds jump into each other. They have they damage their legs. They get injured, and that is it could be a reason. In lay, litter quality, very important. In lay, litter quality, pododermatitis. The males are heavier. So any little anything that is wrong with their legs, and you know, their legs is so important that they have to be active, and if they have any pathology in the legs, is going to show much quicker than in the females.
Right. Okay. Right. What is the ideal ratio of testis weight and body weight?
Oh, it varies between lines. You know, normally what is the an ideal, I will say a good testis size at peak is about 40-45 grams, something like this, and the body weight of the males, if I remember correctly, they will be about just over 4 kilos, something like this. So yeah, do the maths. But you know, we see in lines that are more fertile, the birds, the ratio is much higher. In lines that are less fertile, the ratio is smaller.
Right.
So you know, the so
it's about 1% then, right? A little bit over 1% is better. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Now.
So.
Yeah. Please continue.
Okay, so I have, you know, I have PM, I have postmortem, different lines, and we saw that the males that were lighter, but on their target body weight for that line, their testes were bigger. So, you know, it has also a genetic component on this, and the higher the percentage of testis weight in relation to the body weight, the better.
All right, thank you. Now it's a question about spiking. So, so we need to spike the older females with the new males or younger males, and vice versa, younger female with the older male. Is it possible in both ways?
Yes, yes, it's possible. I mean, with spiking, there are a lot of different ways people spike. Probably the most important thing with spiking is that the males have to be mature. We should never spike live males or males that are not fully mature. They should be at least 4 kilos. They should be as close as possible as the males in the farm where they are going to, because otherwise they will not be able to compete, and initially there will be some fighting, and if they have no body size and mature, it will not work. They will not be able to establish the hierarchy.
Okay.
But there are people that move males. They have a population of males that they will move from one farm to the other, and the females will be younger or older. But ideally, it's very risky. The more movement of birds that you do, biosecurity-wise, is risky.
Fine. I would just like to have last two questions. What is the ideal sperm concentration per AI to get good fertility?
Oh, okay. I will have to check that out. I mean, I used to do this, but I don't remember. But I could give the information.
Okay. Do you feel 100 million sperms per AI is sufficient?
100 million. I don't think that is sufficient. If I remember correctly, I think it has to be a little bit higher, but to be honest, I don't remember numbers, because I used to look at sperm under the microscope a long time ago, and I can't remember, sorry. But
right.
I look it up, and I could answer.
No issue. Just as last question I would like to take. Actually, it's 3 minutes over. Just at what age we'll get maximum fertility in the males, or period, you can say, during what period you can get maximum fertility?
Okay. The maximum fertility males, I will say, is between 28 and 32, 34 weeks. I think that's when they are at their peak of maturity and their peak of sort of fitness, and that's when they are the most fertile. Just like with the females, if the synchronization is good, the females should peak at 28, 30 weeks, and when the males are the most fertile.
Right. Thank you very much, Africa, and thank you. I appreciate your patience. You have answered all the questions very patiently, and it was a very fantastic question and answer session. And thank you very much. And thank you, Maarten. I'm very much thankful you from Namaste. We can say Namaste in India. Yeah. So I'm very much thankful for accepting our request and roping into Dr. Africa Fernandez for this presentation. And I'm also thankful to all the attendees who have spared their valuable time to attend this session. Now over to Stephen. Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much for inviting us. It has been a pleasure, and a lot of questions, very interesting questions, so I think it has been very good.
Thank you, Dr. Africa. Thank you, Dr. Ajay. Thank you, Dr. Maarten. It was a great evening. Every time we used to get excellent feedback from all the participants, and they never get tired of these questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time, and we assure the audience who have posted all these questions that we will ensure that we'll get them answered from Dr. Maarten and Dr. Africa from the previous webinars also. So we will post these the recordings of this session in our YouTube channel soon. So keep watching, and regarding further topics of further webinars, we will keep you posted. So thanks a lot. Thanks for your time, and thanks for being here. Thanks everybody. Bye.